I'm Detective Lucy Hill, and let me tell you something about getting lost in Mobile's industrial maze at 2 a.m. with a murder suspect's trail going cold. You start questioning every life choice that led you to this moment, especially when your Honda's GPS decides to take a coffee break right when you need it most. That's when the BMW pulled up. Not just any BMW, one of those sleek models that costs more than I make in 3 years. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a woman with platinum blonde hair that caught the streetlight like spun gold. Blue eyes that seemed to take in my beat-up Honda, my rumpled jacket, and my obvious frustration in about 2 seconds flat. "You look lost." Her voice had that smooth confidence money buys. Just turned around. I kept my badge visible but my pride intact, looking for Riverside Industrial. "Follow me." She didn't wait for an answer, just pulled ahead with the kind of easy authority I'd never possessed. I followed those expensive taillights through a maze of warehouses and loading docks until we reached the address I'd been hunting for 20 minutes. She stopped, rolled down her window again. "Detective work keeps you up late." Not a question. "Evidence doesn't sleep." She smiled then, and something about it made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with the case. "Avery Howard." She extended a manicured hand through the window. "Lucy Hill." Her handshake was firm, confident, everything mine wasn't. "Drive safe, Detective Hill." Then she was gone, leaving me staring at tire tracks in the gravel and wondering why I felt like I'd just missed something important. 3 weeks later, I'm in interview room B, coffee-stained case files spread across the metal table, when Captain Morris walks in with a woman I recognize immediately. Same blonde hair, same expensive clothes, same confident smile that had haunted my thoughts more than I cared to admit. "Detective Hill, meet our expert consultant." "We've met." Avery Howard extended that same perfectly manicured hand. "Though I didn't know you specialized in explosives cases. I specialize in getting answers." I gestured to the chair across from me, trying to ignore how her presence seemed to fill the cramped room. "The Martin warehouse bombing. Your expertise, my questions." She sat down, crossed her legs with elegant precision. "I've reviewed the blast pattern. Whoever set this knew exactly what they were doing." "Professional job?" "Amateur skill, professional equipment." She leaned forward, and I caught a hint of expensive perfume mixed with something sharper. The placement was crude, but the explosives were military grade. Someone with access but no training. "Inside job?" "Has to be." Those blue eyes met mine directly. "Question is, Detective Hill, are you ready to dig into some very wealthy, very connected people? Because that's where this leads." And there it was, that same challenge I'd seen in her smile 3 weeks ago. Only this time, I was beginning to understand what she'd been offering wasn't just directions through the industrial district. It was an invitation into a world I'd never imagined belonging to, even if I wasn't sure I wanted to accept it. The case was just starting, so was everything else. Working with Avery Howard was like trying to interrogate smoke. Every time I thought I had her pinned down professionally, she'd shift the conversation with that maddeningly confident smile, and suddenly I was the one being analyzed. The warehouse security footage shows our bomber knew exactly which cameras had blind spots. She spread the surveillance photos across my desk with practiced efficiency. This wasn't lucky guesswork. Inside knowledge. I circled the timestamps with red ink, feeling her watch my every move. Someone who'd worked security consulting for Martin Industries. Exactly. Her finger traced the entry point on the building schematic. But here's what bothers me. The bomb placement shows someone who understands structural weak points, but doesn't care about minimizing collateral damage. Meaning, your bomber has the technical knowledge but lacks professional ethics. She leaned back, and I noticed her designer blazer probably cost more than my monthly rent. In my world, we call that dangerous incompetence. Your world. The phrase hung between us like a challenge. Must be nice having connections that get you consulted on every major case in the city. I kept my tone neutral, but something in her expression shifted. "You think I'm here because of who I know? Aren't you?" She stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the precinct parking lot, where my dented Honda sat between patrol cars. "I have 3 degrees in structural engineering and 15 years of controlled demolition experience. My last project was the Meridian Tower downtown. I remembered that job, a 40-story implosion that went off without disturbing the buildings on either side. It had been flawless, expensive, and completely outside my world. Look, I didn't mean to imply—" "Yes, you did." She turned back to me, and for the first time I saw something vulnerable beneath that polished exterior. You meant exactly what you said. The silence stretched between us until my phone rang. Another lead on the case, another late night ahead of me. As I hung up, Avery was gathering her papers. Coffee? The invitation slipped out before I could stop it. Now? Case files don't review themselves. She paused at the door. My place? I have better coffee than the precinct vending machine. That should have been my first warning. Instead, I heard myself saying, I work better in familiar territory. The diner on Government Street? Too public for case discussion. I gestured at the files. Classified material. Then where? My apartment, with its peeling paint, secondhand furniture, and refrigerator that hummed like a dying animal. The place where I'd count bills at my kitchen table and wonder if I'd make rent without picking up overtime shifts. Rain check. I forced a professional smile. Long day tomorrow. She nodded, but something in her eyes suggested she understood more than I was saying. Of course, professional boundaries. After she left, I sat in my empty office reviewing the same case files for the third time, trying to focus on blast patterns and security footage instead of the way she'd looked when I'd accused her of using connections, like someone who'd heard that particular assumption too many times to be surprised by it anymore. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. The bomber will strike again within 72 hours. Same MO, different target. Sleep well, Detective Hill. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then looked up to find the precinct completely empty except for the skeleton night crew. Somehow, in pushing Avery away, I'd managed to isolate myself just when the case was getting dangerous. But that was nothing new. Isolation was my specialty. The anonymous text turned out to be right. 71 hours later, another warehouse exploded on the north side of Mobile, and this time our bomber had upgraded his game. I was knee-deep in debris when Avery arrived at the scene, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, designer jeans replaced by work boots and a hard hat. Seeing her dress down somehow made her more intimidating, not less. Same signature blast pattern. She crouched beside me, studying the twisted metal, but he used twice the explosive force. Getting bolder? Getting desperate. Her fingers traced the scorch marks on a support beam. This level of overkill suggests someone under pressure. Or someone sending a message. She looked at me then, really looked, and I realized I'd been working the scene for 6 hours without a break. My clothes were covered in dust. My hands were shaking slightly from too much coffee and too little food. When did you last eat? I'm fine. That wasn't the question. She stood up, brushing debris from her jeans. There's a food truck outside the perimeter. I need to finish processing. The scene will wait 15 minutes. Something in her tone reminded me she was used to giving orders, used to having them followed. It should have annoyed me. Instead, I found myself walking beside her toward the yellow tape, trying not to notice how she matched her stride to my shorter legs. The food truck served decent burgers and terrible coffee. Avery bought without asking, handing me a paper-wrapped sandwich like it was the most natural thing in the world. You can't afford to feed me? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. She paused with her burger halfway to her mouth. Excuse me? Everyone knows you come from money. The car, the clothes, the penthouse apartment you offered last week. You've been checking up on me. Background research, standard procedure. Right. She set down her food and I could see her putting together pieces I'd rather she leave alone. How much do detectives make in Mobile? Enough. For rent in a decent neighborhood, car payments, health insurance. Each question hit like a small explosion. I manage. I'm sure you do. Her voice had gone soft, careful. Lucy, when I offered coffee at my place, it wasn't charity. Then, what was it? She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Interest. The word hung between us, loaded with possibilities I wasn't ready to examine. I focused on my burger, tasting nothing. We should get back to the scene. Should we? I looked up to find her studying my face with the same intensity she'd used on the blast patterns. Like I was a puzzle she was determined to solve. The evidence will still be there. She leaned forward across the small table. But this conversation might not happen again. Something in her tone made my pulse quicken. What conversation? The one where I tell you that I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night 3 weeks ago. The one where I admit that volunteering to consult on this case had nothing to do with civic duty. My breath caught. Avery, the one where you tell me if that matters to you at all. I stared at her across the plastic table. This woman who lived in a world of penthouses and designer clothes and expense accounts, asking if it mattered that she'd been thinking about me. Me, with my secondhand furniture and unpaid bills and Honda held together with hope and duct tape. It matters. The admission slipped out before I could stop it. Her smile was worth every moment of uncertainty that had led to it. When we got back to the scene, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows through the destroyed warehouse. We worked side by side, her expertise and my investigation instincts fitting together like pieces of the same puzzle. The bomber's escalating. She pointed to blast residue on a far wall. This much force suggests he's running out of patience. Or time. Both, probably. She moved closer to examine the evidence, close enough that I could smell her shampoo mixed with dust and smoke. Lucy, there's something else. What? She turned to face me, and suddenly we were standing much too close in the ruins of someone else's life. Her hand reached up, brushing debris from my cheek. You had, she started to say, but the words died as our eyes met. The kiss happened so naturally I almost didn't realize it was happening until her lips were warm against mine, soft and certain, and tasting faintly of coffee. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, maybe forever. When we broke apart, she looked as surprised as I felt. That was evidence contamination, I finished, though my heart was racing. Definitely unprofessional. Completely inappropriate. We stood there grinning at each other like teenagers until my radio crackled with an update from the lab. Back to work, back to the case, back to pretending that everything hadn't just changed between us in the space of a single kiss. But some evidence can't be ignored, no matter how inconvenient. That kiss changed everything, though we both pretended it didn't. Captain Morris called me into his office 3 days later, closing the door with the kind of deliberate care that meant trouble. Detective Hill, I've received some concerns about your working relationship with our civilian consultant. I kept my expression neutral, though my stomach dropped. What kind of concerns? The kind where patrol officers report seeing you two having dinner together, multiple times. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. I don't need to remind you about fraternization policies. It's a complex case, Captain. Working dinners are standard procedure. Working dinners at Romano's? That's not exactly a coffee shop, Lucy. Damn. Someone had been watching us more closely than I'd realized. Romano's was where Avery had taken me 2 nights ago, insisting we needed somewhere quiet to review witness statements. The restaurant had white tablecloths and wine menus thicker than my case files. The consultant has valuable insights. I'm pursuing every lead. Make sure that's all you're pursuing. His tone softened slightly. Look, I know the Howard family has influence in this city. Just be careful you don't get in over your head. Over my head. Like I didn't already know how far out of my depth I was swimming. That evening, Avery picked me up for what she called a networking opportunity. Some charity fundraiser at the country club where half the city's elite would be gathering. I'd borrowed my one decent dress. A black number I'd worn to my academy graduation. You look beautiful. She kissed my cheek as I got into her car, and I tried not to think about how natural that gesture felt. The country club was exactly what I'd expected. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and enough diamonds to fund my department's budget for a year. Avery moved through the crowd like she belonged, introducing me to city council members and business leaders with easy confidence. That's when I met her friends. Avery, darling. A woman with perfect silver hair and a smile sharp as a scalpel approached us. You didn't mention you were bringing a guest? Margaret, this is Lucy Hill. Lucy, Margaret Blackwood. Margaret's eyes traveled over my borrowed dress and discount shoes with practiced assessment. Hill? Any relation to the Hills who own the shipping company? I'm a police detective. The temperature of Margaret's smile dropped about 20 degrees. How public service oriented. 2 more women joined our conversation, each one finding subtle ways to remind me I didn't belong. Comments about how refreshing it is when Avery supports local charity cases, and questions about whether I'd ever been to Europe or just worked the whole time. Avery didn't defend me. She stood there smiling that polite society smile while her friends dissected my life piece by piece. I excused myself to the bathroom and seriously considered climbing out the window. Instead, I splashed cold water on my face and gave myself the same pep talk I used before difficult interrogations. I was Detective Lucy Hill. I'd earned my badge, my rank, my place at that fundraiser, even if that place was as Avery's curiosity project. When I came out, Avery was waiting in the hallway. "I'm sorry about Margaret, she's... honest?" I kept walking toward the exit. At least she said what everyone else was thinking. "Lucy, wait." Avery caught my arm. "They don't matter." "Don't they?" I turned to face her. "These are your people, Avery. Your friends. Your world. And I'm what? An entertaining diversion?" "You're not a diversion." "Then, what am I?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I walked outside into the humid mobile night, calling for a taxi on my phone. Avery followed, her heels clicking on the brick walkway. "Please don't leave. Not like this." "Why? So I can stand around while more of your friends remind me how grateful I should be for your attention?" "That's not what this is. Isn't it?" I faced her in the parking lot, surrounded by cars that cost more than I'd make in 5 years. "Look around, Avery. Look at where we are, what you drive, what you wear. Then look at me. I am looking at you." Her voice was fierce suddenly. "I've been looking at you since the night I found you lost in that industrial district, trying to solve cases that matter with equipment held together by determination and stubbornness." The taxi pulled up, but neither of us moved. "I see someone brilliant and dedicated and honest." She stepped closer. "I see someone who makes me want to be better than the spoiled rich girl everyone expects me to be." "Avery." "I see someone I'm falling for, scared as that makes me." The confession hung between us in the humid air. Traffic moved past on Government Street, normal people living normal lives, while we stood in a country club parking lot trying to figure out if love could bridge the gap between her world and mine. I should have gotten in that taxi. Should have ended whatever this was before it got more complicated. Instead, I kissed her. This time it wasn't soft or tentative. This time it was desperate and demanding, fueled by frustration and want, and the terrible certainty that we were heading somewhere that would probably destroy us both. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. "Come home with me." "Avery, please." I looked at the taxi driver, patient behind the wheel, then back at her face in the streetlight. "Okay." Her penthouse was everything I'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Mobile Bay, furniture that belonged in magazines, art that probably cost more than my annual salary. But lying in her bed afterward, watching dawn paint the water silver through those expensive windows, I felt like I finally understood what wealthy really meant. It wasn't just money. It was choices, options, the freedom to live without constantly calculating costs. "Coffee?" Avery's voice was soft against my shoulder. "I should get home. Work starts in 2 hours. Call in sick." I laughed. "Detectives don't call in sick for recreational activities." "Is that what this was?" She propped herself up on one elbow, studying my face. "Recreation?" The question deserved honesty. "No." "Good." She kissed my collarbone, sending warmth spiraling through my chest. Because I was hoping it meant something more. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, then again, then started ringing. "Ignore it," Avery murmured. But I was already reaching for it. Captain Morris. At 6:30 in the morning. "Hill. Lucy, you need to get down here immediately. We have a situation." "Another bombing?" "Worse. Someone's written a book about you." 20 minutes later, I was standing in the precinct break room staring at a paperback novel while half my department pretended not to watch my reaction. The cover showed a blonde woman in an expensive suit embracing a brunette in a police uniform against a backdrop of exploding buildings. "Explosive love, a true story." I read the tagline aloud. "When Detective Sarah Mills meets demolition heiress Alexandra Sterling, sparks fly in more ways than one." "Author claims it's based on a real case in Mobile," Captain Morris said quietly. "Real people she observed during the investigation." I flipped through pages, my stomach sinking with every paragraph. The characters were thinly veiled versions of us, the wealthy woman pursuing the struggling detective, intimate conversations I remembered having, even scenes that felt uncomfortably familiar. How did she get this information? Rebecca Chase. Romance novelist, lives in Birmingham. Claims she did extensive research through public records and interviews. We never gave interviews. No, but you two weren't exactly subtle. Romano's, the country club, late nights at crime scenes. His tone was carefully neutral. Small city, Lucy. People notice. The book was already climbing bestseller lists, according to the preliminary report. Amazon reviews called it passionate and authentic, readers praising the author's attention to detail about police procedures and demolition work. The department's getting calls, Morris continued. Media wants interviews about our real-life lesbian detective love story. I felt sick. What kind of calls? The kind that question your objectivity on the bombing case. The kind that suggest you might have compromised evidence to impress a wealthy consultant. My phone rang. Avery's number. Don't answer that here, Morris suggested. In fact, maybe don't answer it at all until we figure out how to handle this. But I was already walking toward my office, the paperback clutched in my sweaty palm. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Lucy? Avery's voice was strained. Have you seen it? Currently holding it. My lawyers are already drafting a cease and desist. This is invasion of privacy, maybe defamation. It's too late. I slumped into my desk chair. It's already out there. People are reading about our private conversations, our what? Everything. I flipped to a random page, reading dialogue that sounded almost exactly like something she'd said to me 3 nights ago. She somehow got details that feel too real to be fiction. I think I know how. What do you mean? Margaret Blackwood. From the country club? Her daughter works in publishing. I saw them talking after you left that night. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Margaret, who'd made those cutting comments about charity cases. Who'd watched us with calculating eyes while pretending to make polite conversation. She fed our story to a novelist. As revenge, maybe. Or entertainment. Avery's voice was bitter. Margaret's always believed other people's lives exist for her amusement. I closed the book, but the damage was already spreading like ripples in dark water. My colleagues were looking at me differently, whispers following me through the precinct halls, questions about whether I'd compromised the bombing investigation, whether my relationship with Avery had clouded my professional judgment. By noon, the local news had picked up the story. By evening, romance websites were dissecting our real-life love affair with breathless enthusiasm. Comments ranged from supportive to savage, readers debating whether the book accurately portrayed lesbian relationships or exploited them for straight female fantasy. Detective Hill? A reporter cornered me in the parking lot as I tried to leave work. Can you comment on how closely explosive love mirrors your actual relationship with Avery Howard? No comment. Is it true you're considering legal action? No comment. Are you still working the bombing case, or has the department reassigned you due to conflict of interest? That question stopped me cold, because I didn't know the answer yet, and that terrified me more than any media attention. The book destroyed everything in slow motion, like watching a controlled demolition where each floor collapsed in perfect sequence until nothing remained standing. Captain Morris called me into his office Monday morning, with a kind of expression that meant my career was about to take a hard left turn into a brick wall. The commissioner's reassigning you to cold cases, effective immediately. Because of a romance novel? Because half the city thinks you compromised an active investigation for personal reasons. He slid a file across his desk. The Howard family's filed complaints about harassment. 3 city council members have called questioning your objectivity. What harassment? Apparently, someone's been taking photos of you and Miss Howard together, sending them to local gossip blogs. He opened his laptop, showing me a website called Mobile Tea. Look familiar? The photos were grainy but unmistakable. Avery and me at Romano's, talking intensely over wine. Another of us outside the crime scene, standing closer than professional colleagues should. One from the country club parking lot that captured the moment just before our desperate kiss. Professional investigation, you said? I stared at the images, feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the grainy quality. Someone had been following us, documenting our relationship, turning private moments into public entertainment. I need space to think. Take all the time you need. You're off the bombing case. Walking out of Morris's office felt like walking through water. Every conversation stopped as I passed. Every glance felt loaded with judgment or pity. Detective Rodriguez, who'd always been friendly, suddenly found something fascinating about his computer screen when I approached. The final blow came that afternoon, in the form of a text from an unknown number. Saw the book. Interesting reading. Call me if you want to discuss a better arrangement. Dean Lee, District Attorney's Office. Dean Lee, the prosecutor every female officer in the department had heard about. Wealthy family, political connections, reputation for dating law enforcement professionals, and helping their careers along. He'd never shown interest in me before, but apparently a lesbian romance scandal made me more attractive. His second text was more direct. Dinner tomorrow? Morton's Steakhouse. I have some thoughts about your future prospects. I stared at the messages, understanding the subtext perfectly. Date me, and your career problems disappear. Align yourself with acceptable heterosexual professional advancement, instead of messy same-sex complications. My phone rang. Avery again. This time I declined the call. She called back immediately. Declined. The third time she texted, "We need to talk. This isn't over." But it felt over. Everything felt over. That evening, I sat in my small apartment surrounded by takeout containers and unpaid bills, reading online reviews of our love story. Readers debated whether Sarah Mills was too good for Alexandra Sterling, whether their class differences were realistic obstacles, whether the author had captured authentic lesbian experiences or just repackaged straight fantasy. One comment stopped me cold. These characters feel so real, like the author actually knew them. I wonder if this really happened somewhere. Another reader responded, I live in Mobile, and there's definitely gossip about a detective and some rich woman. Makes you wonder how much fiction this actually is. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Avery standing in my hallway, still in the expensive clothes that marked her as someone who belonged in a different world. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. You've been avoiding me. I've been processing. For 3 days? It's been a complicated 3 days. I gestured at my living room, where newspapers and printouts of online articles covered every surface. Welcome to the aftermath of our love story. She looked past me at the chaos. Lucy, we can fight this. How? Sue everyone who bought the book? Demand retractions from gossip websites? Make statements about our private relationship to prove we're not what people think we are? If necessary. And what are we, Avery? The question came out harder than I'd intended. Because I'm not sure I know anymore. She stepped closer, and I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something that was just her. We're two people who fell for each other despite every rational reason not to. Exactly. Despite every reason. I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. Maybe we should have listened to those reasons. You don't mean that. Don't I? Look what's happened. My career's in shambles, your family's threatening you, and strangers are dissecting our relationship on book review websites. So we weather the storm. Storms end, Avery. This feels more like climate change. We stood there in my doorway, the woman I'd fallen for looking at me like I was breaking her heart in real time. Maybe I was. Maybe breaking both our hearts was the kindest thing I could do before this destroyed us both completely. I need time to think. How much time? I don't know. She nodded slowly, her composure finally cracking just enough for me to see the hurt underneath. When you figure it out, call me. After she left, I sat on my couch staring at Dean Lee's text messages. Morton's Steakhouse, career prospects, a nice, safe, heterosexual solution to all my problems. I typed back, tomorrow at 7 works. Then I threw my phone across the room and tried not to think about what I'd just done. Dean Lee turned out to be exactly what I'd expected. Polished, connected, and utterly uninteresting. He spent dinner at Morton's talking about his political aspirations, and how a detective wife would complement his district attorney ambitions perfectly. Partnership is about mutual benefit, he explained over expensive wine I couldn't taste. Your investigative experience, my prosecution background. We'd make a formidable team. I nodded at appropriate intervals while mentally calculating how many months of my salary this dinner cost. The Howard situation was unfortunate, he continued, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. But these things happen. Career recovers faster than you'd think with the right support. Support meaning you. Support meaning someone who understands how this city works. His smile was perfectly rehearsed. Someone who can open doors that recent events may have closed. The offer was clear, practical, safe. Date Dean Lee, marry Dean Lee, Become the respectable detective wife who helped his career while he rescued mine. A nice, neat solution that erased every complication Avery had brought into my life. My phone buzzed. Captain Morris. Hill, we need you back. Industrial District, another bombing. Bigger this time. I was already standing, on my way. Lucy? Dean's voice followed me toward the exit. Think about what I said. 20 minutes later, I stood in what used to be a warehouse, staring at destruction that made our previous crime scenes look like firecrackers. This explosion had been massive, professional, and completely different from our bomber's previous work. 3 casualties, the fire chief reported. 2 workers who were supposed to be off shift, 1 security guard. Real victims this time. Real deaths. That's when I saw her. Avery crouched beside a twisted piece of structural steel, her face grim in the floodlights. She looked up as I approached, and something flickered in her expression before she went professionally neutral. Different signature, she said without preamble. This wasn't our warehouse bomber. You're sure? Completely. This is military-grade work, precisely calculated for maximum structural damage. Our guy's been playing with commercial explosives and learning as he goes. This is someone who knew exactly what they were doing. 2 bombers? Or one who just got very deadly professional help. Captain Morris appeared at my shoulder. What are we looking at? Escalation, Avery answered. And a timeline that's accelerating faster than we anticipated. For the next 4 hours, we worked the scene like we had before the book, before the scandal, before everything fell apart. Her expertise and my investigative instincts fitted together seamlessly, professional chemistry that had nothing to do with personal complications. Around 3 a.m., while examining blast residue near what used to be the building's support structure, part of the damaged roof shifted above us with a grinding metal sound that made my blood freeze. Move! Avery shoved me sideways, just as a section of twisted steel and concrete crashed down exactly where I'd been standing. We hit the ground hard, her body covering mine, debris raining around us in a cloud of dust and smaller fragments. For a moment, all I could hear was our breathing and the settling sounds of destruction. You okay? Her voice was shaky against my ear. Yeah, you? She pulled back enough to look at me, and suddenly we weren't detective and consultant anymore. Suddenly we were just Lucy and Avery, lying in the ruins of someone else's life, staring at each other like we'd both almost lost something irreplaceable. Lucy, I know. This time when she kissed me, it wasn't desperate or frustrated. It was soft, careful, like she was trying to memorize the moment before it disappeared. I kissed her back, tasting dust and fear and something that felt terrifyingly like coming home. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. I've been dating women from my mother's social circle. I know. I saw the society page photos. They're everything you'd expect. Appropriate, connected, boring as hell. Her thumb traced my cheek, wiping away grit and maybe tears. None of them challenge me. None of them make me want to be better. Avery, none of them are you. In the distance, I could hear Captain Morris calling for a structural engineer to assess the building's stability. Soon this moment would end, we'd go back to our separate worlds. And I'd have to decide whether Dean Lee's offer was the smart choice or the coward's choice. I had dinner with Dean Lee tonight. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went very still. He offered me a solution. Career stability, social acceptability, a partnership that makes sense on paper. What did you tell him? That I'd think about it. I looked up at the stars visible through the hole in the warehouse roof. But lying here, almost watching you get crushed trying to save me, I realized something. What? I don't want safe. I don't want easy. I don't want a partnership that makes sense on paper. I met her eyes. I want you, even if it's complicated, even if it's scary, even if your friends look at me like I'm a charity case and my colleagues think I've lost my mind. Her smile was brilliant in the floodlights. Are you sure? Because I come with a lot of baggage. Wealthy family drama, social expectations, friends who can be absolute nightmares. I come with financial stress, professional complications, and an apartment held together by stubbornness and duct tape. Perfect. We'll be a disaster together. She kissed me again, and this time it tasted like promises neither of us was entirely sure we could keep. The media circus around explosive love had died down to a low simmer when Avery's lawyers found the smoking gun we needed. Phone records, her attorney explained across the conference table at Blackwood and Associates. Rebecca Chase made 17 calls to Margaret Blackwood between September and November, right when she was writing the book. I leaned forward, studying the highlighted phone logs. Margaret was feeding her information. More than that. Margaret's personal assistant kept detailed notes about your relationship, including dates, locations, even overheard conversations from the country club. Stalking, Avery said grimly. Systematic documentation of our private lives for entertainment purposes. Invasion of privacy at minimum. Possibly harassment. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Holly Hill, who happened to be my cousin, smiled like a shark scenting blood. We have enough to sue both Chase and Margaret for damages. What kind of damages? Career harm, emotional distress, loss of privacy. Holly consulted her notes. Lucy's been reassigned from active cases, her professional reputation questioned. Avery's had to deal with family pressure and social ostracism. This isn't just about money, it's about accountability. We filed the lawsuit 3 days later. The local media, hungry for the next chapter in our story, covered it breathlessly. Real-life couple fights back against romance novel exploitation. Read the Mobile Register headline. That evening, Avery picked me up for what she called a strategy session, but felt more like a date. We drove to her place, ordering Chinese takeout and spreading legal documents across her expensive coffee table. Holly thinks we can win, I said, highlighting key passages in the depositions. Money's not the point. No, but justice is. I looked up from the papers to find her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What? You're different when you're fighting for something you believe in. Focused, determined. She moved closer on the couch. It's attractive. Everything's attractive when you're winning. We haven't won yet. But we're going to. I set down the highlighter, turning to face her fully. Because what they did was wrong, and wrong deserves consequences. She kissed me then, slow and thorough, tasting like victory and possibility. When we broke apart, her hands were tangled in my hair. I should go, I whispered, though I made no move to leave. Should you? There's work tomorrow, legal meetings. There's also tonight. Her fingers traced the line of my jaw. There's also us, here, now, not letting other people's opinions dictate what we do anymore. She had a point. For weeks, we'd been reactive, hiding, defending, explaining ourselves to people who didn't matter. Maybe it was time to be proactive instead. I kissed her back, and this time it was my hands pulling her closer, my initiative that moved us from the couch toward her bedroom. We made love with a desperation that had less to do with physical need and more to do with reclaiming something that belonged to us and nobody else. Afterward, lying in her expensive sheets watching Mobile's lights twinkle through floor-to-ceiling windows, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, peace. The book's going to trial, Avery said quietly. Good. It might get ugly. More media attention, more people dissecting our relationship. Let them. I turned to face her, studying the way shadows played across her features. I'm tired of being ashamed of what we have. Even if it costs you professionally? Especially then. Because if Mobile's police department can't handle having a detective who's in love with a woman, that says more about them than it does about me. The trial began 6 weeks later. Holly had been right. We were going to win. Rebecca Chase's publisher settled out of court rather than face the precedent of celebrities having privacy rights. Margaret Blackwood proved to be an unsympathetic defendant, her deposition revealing a calculating woman who documented our relationship for spite and entertainment. The day after the settlement was announced, Captain Morris called me into his office. The commissioner wants you back on active duty. Because we won the lawsuit? Because public opinion has shifted. Turns out people don't like the idea of being stalked and having their private lives turned into fiction without consent. He slid a file across his desk. New bombing case, multiple suspects, complex investigation. Do I get to choose my consultant? His smile was the first genuine one I'd seen from him in months. I hear Avery Howard's schedule just cleared up. That evening, we held our own private celebration at Romano's, the same restaurant where we'd had our first working dinner, where Margaret's spies had photographed us for gossip websites. This time we sat at the best table, ordered the most expensive wine, and didn't care who saw us. To winning, Avery raised her glass. To fighting back. To not letting other people write our story. We clinked glasses, and I realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in our relationship, but in how I saw myself. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't apologizing for who I was or who I loved. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we solve crimes, catch bombers, and prove that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you fight harder for what matters." She kissed me across the table, and this time I didn't check to see who might be watching. 1 year later, I stood in the converted warehouse that housed Hill Howard Security Consulting, watching Avery explain blast pattern analysis to a room full of insurance investigators. Sunlight streamed through the industrial windows we'd kept when we renovated the space, highlighting the confidence in her gestures as she worked through complex structural calculations. "The explosion originated here," she pointed to the diagram, "but the damage pattern indicates secondary charges designed to maximize insurance claims rather than actual destruction." Insurance fraud. Our specialty had evolved from catching bombers to catching people who hired bombers for profit. Turns out there was plenty of work for a team that combined investigative expertise with demolition knowledge. My phone buzzed. Another case referral from Captain Morris, who'd become one of our best sources of business once the department realized we could solve cases they didn't have resources for. "Hill Howard Consulting," I answered without looking up from the financial reports spread across my desk. "Lucy? It's Holly. You need to see the news." I grabbed the remote, flipping to Channel 3, where an entertainment reporter was interviewing Rebecca Chase about her latest book. "Explosive Love was such a success that we're developing it into a Netflix series," Chase was saying. "Of course, we'll be taking creative liberties to make it more dramatic for television audiences." My stomach dropped. "They're making it into a show?" "Gets worse." Holly's voice was grim. "I just got off the phone with their legal team. Apparently our lawsuit only covered the book rights, not adaptation rights." Across the room, Avery had stopped mid-presentation, watching the screen with an expression that could have melted steel. "We'll fight it," I said automatically. "We can try, but this time they have better lawyers and deeper pockets." I hung up as Avery wrapped up her presentation and ushered the insurance investigators toward the door with professional efficiency that masked the fury I could see in her eyes. "Netflix series?" she said when we were alone. "Holly's looking into our legal options." "Let me guess. Expensive and uncertain." I nodded. We'd built something beautiful here, something that was entirely ours. The converted warehouse, the business we'd grown case by case, the life we'd constructed that didn't require anyone else's approval. But success made us visible again, and visibility made us targets. "You know what the difference is this time?" Avery moved to the window, looking out at Mobile Bay where container ships moved like distant promises. "What?" "This time I don't care what they say about us." She turned back to me, and her smile was fierce. "Let them make their show. Let them cast actresses who look nothing like us and write dialogue we never said. Let them turn our story into whatever fantasy sells episodes. Because we know the truth. We lived it, we fought for it, we built something real from it." She gestured around our converted warehouse office. "This is our life, not their entertainment." The phone rang again. Another case, another client who needed our particular combination of skills. I answered it, taking notes about a suspicious warehouse fire in Birmingham, while Avery pulled up building schematics on her computer. 3 hours later we were driving toward Birmingham in her car, still expensive, still sleek, but now it carried our equipment and case files instead of just her designer clothes. "I've been thinking about marriage," she said as we passed the city limits. My heart stuttered. "Have you?" "Not because of social pressure or legal benefits or any of the usual reasons." She kept her eyes on the road, but reached over to take my hand. "Because I want to promise you something." "What?" "That whatever they write about us, whatever shows they make, whatever stories other people tell, this is real. We're real. And no one else gets to define what that means." I squeezed her hand, thinking about the warehouse fire waiting for us in Birmingham, the cases we'd solve together, the business we'd continue building one complex investigation at a time. "Is that a proposal? Would you say yes if it was?" I looked at her profile in the sunset light, this woman who'd found me lost in an industrial district, and somehow convinced me we could navigate any maze together. "Ask me properly and find out." She pulled over at a rest stop, turning to face me in the growing dusk. "Lucy Hill, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in crime solving? warehouse converting, Netflix ignoring, and whatever other adventures we can't even imagine yet? Yes. She kissed me there beside Interstate 65, truck drivers and families with vacation luggage moving past us like we were just another couple making promises in Alabama twilight. Normal people living a normal love story that happened to be extraordinary for us. 6 months later, we held our wedding ceremony on the dock behind our converted warehouse, Holly officiating while Captain Morris and half the mobile police department looked on. No society pages, no gossip websites, no unauthorized biographies. Just us, the people who mattered, and the certainty that some stories don't need anyone else's permission to be perfect exactly as they are. The Netflix series premiered and flopped after 1 season. Turns out fictional drama couldn't compete with the real thing.